So if everyone's ready, constructive gonna starting right now. We negate the resolution. As a concept, we're going to prove that treating juveniles as adults will fall both the moral and practical process of the law. The juvenile justice system provides better alternative to promote the rule of law framework. In the standard for this debate is to preserve the rule of law which respects the human right for everyone in society, including victims and criminals. The law shall not be biased to prioritize the rights of some over those of others. Foundation 1. Challenge the legal foundation. Treating juveniles as adults with more severe punishment violates the rule of law by harming the offender and their family rights while failing and to not acknowledge the fact that violence is often caused by society factors. Sir Warren. First, psychological differences. Although some may argue that a juvenile should have the fundamental mental maturity to know the consequence of their action, the legal capability requires more than this fundamental maturity, as juvenile often lack self-control, legal competence, and basic knowledge of the punishment, which is being too emotional before they do the action. We have two examples. First, according to Morgan Taylor, which is supporting the concept, the United States Supreme Court has considered neuroscience research in the court, seeking difference between juvenile and adults. Chinese law also stated that under the age of around 18 years old, which is supporting the concept, juveniles should be treated as children instead of adults. Second, abuse. Adult jail violates the juvenile basic human rights and causes more traumas with abuse and violence. The abuse may happen in two forms. First, physical abuse. The adult prison young juveniles are continuously beaten by staff and other prisoners. Young people housed in adult correctional facility are twice as likely to be beaten by staff and 50% more likely to be attacked with a weapon than used in a juvenile facility. Second, sexual abuse. A survey found that 80% of the juvenile in the process suppressed gender non-conforming behavior while detained due to the fears of sexual harassment and assaults. 5 times as many youths held in adult prison have experienced sexually attacked or raped than those held in a juvenile institution. Third, bias. Minority youth receive harsher treatment than similarly situated white youth at every stage of the process, which is the criminal justice system, from treating them as adults. According to Hillary, we tell minority youth made up about 1/3 of the juvenile population nationwide and 2/3 of the detained and community population in secure juvenile facilities. African American youth are overrepresented more than any other minority groups. In California in 2015 alone, we tell 88% of the juvenile trials as adults were youth of color, so 88% discrimination actually happened in the process. Thus, the rehabilitative juvenile system that is separated from the adult system is justified by the fundamental difference between juvenile offender and adult to reduce the reoffense rate and facilitate healthy social moral development for most offender and let them better fit society later on. Condition 2, adult system fails. Treating juveniles as adults will not only fail the spirit of law, but also fail to bring any of the practical benefits. Subpoint A, recidivism, which is re-offense rate. Adult prison is just a school for violence and crime, according to Billy 02, because the older inmates, the older criminal, teach younger one how to commit a crime and avoid consequences. We're basically saying that even a brave stay in the jail may, where adults role model as other criminals still damaging perception into children's minds. Due to this fact, adult justice system fails to deter the crime as re-offense rate actually increase, which has 3 years of release, 70% of the young prisoners were rearrested and 50% were reconvicted for new crime. Juvenile system, but however, as a context, is more effective at lowering the reoffense rate by providing more mental consulting and avoiding peer effects. According to 20, we tell a similar 1% increase in education as juvenile system reduces these offenses by 4,000, which is nearly 30% more effective, more than just putting people into the punishment system simply as a process. Education juvenile system appears there's a scope to reduce any type of poverty crime. Subpoint B, labeling theory. Labeling as criminal will give juvenile a wrong message to treat themselves as criminal and become more violent. According to Bassmer 2017, which first being labeled might increase in individual association with delinquent individual and influence his or her self-perception, attitude, and belief. Second, people may be pushed into a criminal lifestyle as a result of potential blockage and a conventional and non-criminal pathway. Labeling might have a stronger effect with younger offenders, for whom personality and behavior are presumably more malleable when a sentence creates a feeling that offender being excluded from the society that punished them. So when this criminal are labeled as criminal, acting like a criminal, causing more crime to society. For all the reasons, boss strongly negate the resolution. Thank you.
All right, so is anybody not ready? Cool. If that's the case, then time starts Now, we affirm when evaluating today's round, public security should be the only concern as it is to the major good. Contention 1, retribution. Carl Smith, 2006, explains the key principle of retribution is moral proportionality. A punishment should mirror the degree of moral offense to the perpetrator. Retribution is a natural response to crime. Electrical library supports when society executes retribution on criminal by means of fines, incarceration, or death. These punishments are a social expression of the personal vengeance and the criminal's victims feel, rationally confined to what is the best for society as a whole. Two impacts are derived from retribution: vigilantism when we lack it, and deterrence when we have it. For vigilantism, Wallen and Klarovich explains the majority of these punishments are nowhere near the punitiveness of adult offender. This results in a civil unrest that turn into vigilante violence in extreme cases. According to ASAP 2019 from the University of Amsterdam, behaviors that violate moral imperatives result in public outrage, which justifies the vigilante violence and punishment for the criminal. The same source suggests that this vigilante violence occur in forms such as shaming, slapping, torturing, or lynching the offenders. The statistics from Silky 2001 further support this. A massive amount of unreported retaliation is occurring against criminals. Each year, potential victims of crime kill between 1,400 and 3,200 criminals and injure a further of 7,700 to 18,500. The solvency to vigilante violence is to decrease the leniency to violent offenders by trying them in adult courts, which in turn builds the authority and legitimacy of the legal system. Levitt 1998 proved there is a 60% increase in the punitiveness of the adult criminal justice system, while there was a 20% decline in juvenile courts. When comparing these statistics, we see the severity of punishment in juvenile courts are only half of the adult courts. Now to deterrence when we have retribution. The foundational logic chain we present here is the deterrence model. A, probability of punishment. B, severity of punishment. And C, speed of punishment. These three impacts are achieved by transition from juvenile courts to adult courts, which decreases leniency towards violent crime. Therefore, the evaluation of the risk of committing the crime from potential juvenile offender deters them from doing so, and thereby lowering the crime rate. The empirical study from Redding and Fuller 2004 suggests that 74.5% of violent juvenile offenders would have not committed the crime if they knew the consequences. Furthermore, Hansen 2014 in assault and robberies, the most common of violent crime, the decrease in offenses are 13 to 33% and 23 to 68% respectively. The study aimed at juvenile violent offender proved the deterrence model by giving statistics about a decreasing crime rate as the severity of punishment increases. Contention 2, juvenile system fails. Generally speaking, the sole purpose of juvenile system is to give juvenile a second chance. If that fails, then the sole purpose of juvenile justice system fails. Fagan 2010 explains juvenile correctional facility is designed to mainly control its residents and restrict their personal freedom. Movement and association are intensively regulated. Outsiders' contact with family, friends, and intimate partner is attenuated and used as incentive for good behavior. Access to media and culture is restricted. Privacy is non-existent, and choice of clothing, language, and other modes of personal expression is off limits. Whatever developmental importance these forms of self-expression and self-determination may have for adolescents, it is sacrificed to the primary goal of security, control, discipline, and punishment. Furthermore, not only does juvenile system fail to help juvenile, but incentivizes its recidivism. Holman 2013 explains 70% of youth held in secure detention were arrested or returned to secure detention within just 1 year release. Furthermore, juvenile court are unfair. Loveland 2017 explains juveniles do not have a right to a jury trial in the fact-finding phase of the juvenile court. Judges become intimately aware of information that threatens to shape their opinion about accused juvenile before fact-finding. Even the most careful judges are, after all, humans. Juries, in contrast, are carefully shielded from inadmissible information by the rule of procedure and evidence. Thus, we see that if the sole purpose of juvenile criminal justice system was to rehabilitate and educate these juveniles fails and does not provide rehabilitation, but only negative impacts on morality, which is unfairness, and also negative impacts on recidivism, which is actually increasing crime, why should we ever adopt it? Thus, we're very proud to stand on the resolution today. Thanks.
I'll check 2 cards. Can we
Sure.
check 2 cards? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. So the first card is about your vigilantism.
Which one?
The vigilantism.
There are
Like,
5 vigilantes.
Of the 60% increase and 20% in decline.
Okay,
that one.
okay.
And the second one we need is about 70% of like the juvenile return to security detention.
Okay.
Thank you. Both link in card.
Yeah, sure. My opponents, we have sent one card and also the other link. We're cutting the card like right away now. All right, the card is sent. So do you want to use your prep to check the evidences, or like we can proceed to crossfire?
We can just move on to the second test. Okay.
Sure.
So if everyone's ready, I'm gonna starting right now. We talk about vigilantism. Can I know what is the exact number of vigilantism cases actually happen right now until now?
Okay. For per year, there's 1,400 to 3,200 criminals being hurt, being killed, and 7,700 and 18,500 being killed. That is pretty much of a large number. All right. So can we have a question?
But this evidence is not topical because it's not actually specified to
No, we
like
tell that
juvenile
okay.
system.
Even if it's not about juveniles, we tell it does not matter, Judge. This evidence
But
just tells
it
you.
is actually
Hey, can I
matter
finish? Can I
because
finish my explanation, please?
I want
So we
to
tell.
do a quick
I'm sorry, but you
clarification.
asked a follow
Sure,
up. So
just
I'm
calm
like
down,
trying.
okay? Calm down, you can go on.
Yeah, sure. So we tell you that, Judge, no matter what age group it is, this card tells you if the society is dissatisfied with the punishment given, then we tell you that they would all lead to vigilantism, especially when we prove to that the juvenile court have a 0.5 times like the punishment of adult court.
Can I do a
They
quickly
lead to
follow up? Can I do
Sure.
a quick clarification? So, Judge, our opponent evidence, they're not actually specified to the juvenile system. That means their evidence is not topical because they cannot really prove that vigilantism is unique harm for the concept. That means the process also have the vigilantism. The victim are also suffering from the from the process. So that means two sides are actually the same. They cannot really prove any of the unique harm. I think you can move on to your question.
Okay, sure. Then we'll elaborate in rebuttal. And my question is for contention 2 subpoint A about your side reducing recidivism. First, you talk about the evidence of a 70% rearrested and 50% recommit crime. And second, you
Sure.
say education reduces crime. But the second one, it is about property crime, as you have said. And the first one, you're just talking about general crime. Why do you think that the statistics about general crime and like property crime would be applied to violent crime?
So basically we're saying that 80% of the crime actually caused by juvenile is actually violent crime. So that's exactly the number we're showing you right
Okay,
now because
so
most of the cases is basically violent crime. So our evidence definitely stand on the status quo.
So then you're saying that education does not reduce violent crime. So that means that rehabilitation has
Education
nothing to do with
definitely
violent
reduce
crime.
violent crime because
No,
we
because
just
your
use our
education card.
rehabilitation to let them better fit in society later on, and that
I'm
is
sorry,
basically
your education card
decelerating crime.
directly says education reduce property crime. So that means no matter how high the number of violent crime is in the total crime, still education has nothing to do with that. Simply because your card
Yes,
only
without
how
a
education
violent
is
crime is
good.
a count
I
as a
mean,
part of the property
can I
crime.
finish? Yeah, can I finish? No. Judge, the difference is for
Definition,
property
the
crime
definition
is
wrong.
okay. I steal your stuff. I steal your stuff. I steal your phone. That is property crime. But for violent crime, I rob your phone.
No, the
I
property crime
I
actually
physically
contain
okay.
every single crime, and we're talking
I'm
about
sorry,
how like
but like if you want to check on the Merriam-Webster dictionary on your laptop's dictionary, it's both okay.
no.
Property crime basically means it's just
Actually,
crime of the
it's
property.
a definition wrong, okay? So, Judge, we're talking about if you just check the definition by yourself, the property crime actually also count as a violent crime. It actually count
Okay.
a part of a violent crime.
Okay,
Also,
now
we have
take
that
okay,
mystery
even
that
if we take a step
80% of
back. If we take a
those
step
crime are
back.
actually crime.
Look,
Like,
if we take a step back, even if
you
it
can go on.
means like general crime, we tell that violent crime is different. If I hold a gun and kill somebody, that means probably I'm having some mental issues, right? I'm probably a psychopath that cannot be educated. But if I steal money, if I steal money, that probably just means I'm poor, right? Probably rehabilitation can solve one, but not
You just
another.
can just check the
Thanks.
definition by
Time's
yourself.
up.
There's no need
Thanks.
for to talk more. Thank you. We're gonna run 1 minute prep. I like to call 30. We like to call 30 seconds more.
Never mind. I can't start. So is anyone not ready? So my rebuttal will start. Now, firstly, let's go over to framework. They talk about how they will maintain the public security. However, we're telling that our framework definitely should be the framework that is used in this way, as we're telling that we are respecting everyone's right, and law is designed to respect everyone's right, while our opponent judge is sacrificing their rights for other people. Now, let's move on specifically onto their first contention. First, one general response. Our opponents have to prove to us that more severe punishment will actually be applied. For all offenses at rate, the average prison time actually served was only about 27% of the sentence imposed. We're telling you that even if our opponents claim that retribution is good, they cannot tell us that they will actually receive the punishment. And second, for their point about vigilantism, firstly, we're telling that our opponents provide us with absolutely no evidence of the impacts. They provide us with no evidence showing that it actually happens, while the only evidence they provide us with is actually the approximate number that will happen. And their point is based on the fact that they're based on the assumption that these victims are not actually satisfied with the system. However, we're telling you that by a 2-to-1 margin, victims prefer that the criminal justice system focus more on rehabilitating people who commit crimes than punishing them. So this is supporting our side, as we're telling you that our opponents' point about vigilantism fail because these people are already satisfied with the system and they support rehabilitation more than retribution. And third, we're telling that in the adult system, they only serve short terms and they have an open trial, which just means that everyone would know they're not receiving the punishment they deserve. So vigilantism would be easier to happen. So we're telling that vigilantism does not exist on our side, while it is more severe on our opponent's side. Now let's move on to their sub-point B about deterrence. Firstly, we're telling that there's no deterrent effect found in treating juveniles as adult criminals. According to UCLA School of Law, little to no deterrent effect on juveniles prosecuted in adult court have been found. Exposure of juveniles to adult offenders, probably with the controlling prison populations and denial of needed services to juveniles would exist. Prisons certainly have an element of being schools for criminals. Likewise, in Florida juvenile prisons, we find significant peer effects. So the older inmates will actually teach the younger inmates how to commit crimes and how to get away with consequences. So firstly, we're telling you that this is not respecting the rights of the juveniles, and second is further heightening the recidivism rate. And second, we're telling that, as our opponents mentioned in their own case, the reason for the crime is not because the laws are not strict enough, it is because they do not know the laws, and this can easily be solved by our side. As our opponents said, the problem is that they do not even know they could be transferred as adults. Now let's move on to how their second contention about how the juvenile justice system fail. Firstly, we're telling that on our opponent's side, there is even more abuse. Firstly, physical abuse. Young people housed in adult correctional facilities are twice as likely to be beaten by staff and 50% more likely to be attacked with a weapon than youth in juvenile facilities. And second is sexual abuse. A survey which is 80% suppressed gender non-conforming behaviors while detained due to fears of sexual harassment and assaults. 5 times as many youth held in adult prisons have experienced sexual attack or rape than those held in juvenile institutions. And this is the abuse in the process of putting them into the jail. And we're also telling that there is actually bias in the process of trialing these juveniles. Minority youths receive harsher punishment than similarly situated white youths at every stage of the criminal justice system from treating them as adults. Many people and many members of the juries have expressed a bias towards the racial minorities. So we're telling that in the process of trialing these juveniles, the racial minorities are more likely to be convicted of violent crimes, while white people or the racial majorities will not be convicted of these violent crimes. More minorities will be sent to adult jail, and with the open trial, they're more likely to be perceived as violent. Again, this would be a toxic cycle and send a biased and racist social message to society. So this is why our opponent's side have more abuse. And second, we are also telling that we have already showed you direct impact on our side. So for every 1% increase in education, this reduces the crimes by 3,590, which is nearly 30% more than our opponent's side. So for this point about how juvenile system fail, firstly, we're telling that there's even more abuse on our opponent's side, and we're telling also that on our side, we have already provided you with the solid impacts showing the effectiveness of the juvenile system. So for all of these reasons, we strongly urge to combat it so for that we win both morally and practically. Thank you.
Opponents and judges, if you guys can hear me and are ready, I'll carry on with my rebuttal speech. So I'll begin my rebuttal Now, several part clarification, right? In the crossfire, our opponents talked about vigilantism. However, we tell you that vigilantism is exacerbated in the JJS with more lenient punishments, and society has no boundaries whatsoever in punishing them, which is a problem. Our opponents never actually talked about this. Since we talk about once you give them more lenient punishments, the society is not going to agree with this punishment, and not just the victim, but other potential victims are going to punish them as well, such as lynching. We'll give further examples into this. Now let's move on to this thesis, right? Our opponents talked about the human right for everyone. However, people who breach others' human rights do not get human rights themselves in any prison. Take the status quo of JJS. They removed the human rights such as freedom from these people, which is why our opponents saying that they can have human rights is ridiculous. It's not going to happen in the status quo or materialize in any world. Second, society safety is the key and biggest net benefit of our side, which is why you're voting for us if you're concerned about society safety as we reduce the recidivism rate. Last, the only moral leniency should be given to the innocent and the victims. Now let's move on to their first contention. They tell you several things. First, they tell you the psychological differences of the juveniles from adults. And second, they tell you about the abuse, right? So taking a look at their first example, they talk about the lack of control. However, not every adolescent their age commits crimes. In fact, the majority of them doesn't actually commit the crime, which means that they are not really persuasive in talking about this, right? There are some individual factors that determine whether they commit the crime or not. Second, adults that are immature do not get leniency as well. So from this, we derive one example. 16 to 18-year-old is the most where most juvenile crimes are committed while they're the most developed. Individual issues are the key to this, right? According to Chris 2013 from Vanderbilt University. Therefore, we shouldn't use the age as a bar line. For example, there's no significant difference between 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds. Therefore, we should derive something like a test, or since in the CJS you can defend yourself about this, instead of just saying once you're under 18, we're automatically going to send you to rehab because you're under 18 and you're immature. Now let's take a look at their second reason. They talk about abuse and they give you 3 examples. First, physical abuse. Second is sexual abuse, and last, bias from the majority, right? From the minority. So first, JJS has abuse as well. According to BJ's 2013, 81% of people have been abused by staff. So I don't see why staff is a unique issue in the CJS, since this happens in every world. Second, in the CJS, they're separated according to Austin 2000, right? They're separated from these inmates that might abuse them because they're small. Therefore, we actually solve that probability. In the JJS, these violent psychopaths are more likely to actually commit a crime on them, which is why JJS has the worst of this issue. When talking about bias, CJS does it better with juries compared to for-profit judges in JJS because the jury groups are actually a bunch of more well-rounded people, and all of them have to agree that you have committed a crime in order for you to actually be committed in the CJS. So in our system, we actually do it better compared to these judges who want to send them into private prisons where they earn money when more people go in. Now let's take a look at their last contention, subpoint A, recidivism. They talk about 70% rearrested, 50% reconvicted, and 40% more effective in property crime. As my partner has already talked about, drop the property crime. Second, we want to talk about how this is an unfair comparison, right? In our world, all the people that transfer to the adult prisons are the most violent and worst of the criminals that committed the violent crimes, while in their world, most of the people in JJ are static criminals that drank alcohol or skipped school. There's no comparison between them. Second of all, even in this comparison, we still win with a 74.5% reduced recidivism, which means we are actually much better in every single aspect. Last, Hansen 14 talks about a reduced in 13 to 68% of violent crime in Oregon for juveniles with harsher laws. And for all these reasons, I'm so proud to affirm.
Okay, so
Right for crossfire, you can have the first question. Yeah.
So my first question would be, so you're saying that they deserve no rights? So
No, I'm saying in your world you don't present rights either, right?
So what we're saying is that they should receive the rights. The criminal justice system should preserve everyone's right, including those of the criminals, because
okay, sorry.
We would just torture them and kill them. So what you're
we
saying
don't
is
torture them and kill them in CJS, right?
Sorry, can you just quickly clarify. What you're saying
Sorry, I
is that
think you're
you don't deserve any
misleading
rights.
everybody, right? So in CJS, I don't think there's any card or any instance where we torture this criminal, right? In the majority of the cases,
No,
that
I'm just
doesn't
saying
happen.
using your
And
logic.
in the
can I
JJS,
just
I want
finish?
to
think you
ask about how you
misunderstood my
actually give them
question.
human rights. How do you give them human rights?
Can I just finish clarifying my question and then I will answer
Sure,
you, okay?
sure.
So my question was about you said that they do not deserve rights and only the innocent
I didn't
and
say
people
they
who-
don't deserve rights. I'm
what
saying the
you were
status
saying
quo
is
doesn't
that-
support it.
Sorry, what you were saying is that these juveniles who are innocent are the only ones that deserve rights. However, on our side, we were telling you firstly we were giving them fair treatment because on your side there's 88% corruption in the juries because mostly of the racial minorities are not represented in the jury, so they're more likely to be discriminated against.
Sorry.
So we're saying
I think
all
you
sides
spent a
is
minute
actually-
clarifying your question. Can I
for-
get an
for-
opportunity to answer it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you. So your human rights talking about, I'm not sure if you used that phrase correctly, but human rights is not given in a prison, right? You do not have freedom. You do not have outwards contact. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Sorry.
Can you let me finish? Can you just let me finish a paragraph without interrupting?
Sorry to cut you off, but what you're saying is not the base, not human rights. These ones are the sum of the human rights that we are talking about. However, they should also have.
I'm
the
just
right to
saying the
defend
status quo
themselves.
doesn't support it. Can you let me finish,
No,
please?
that's not what we're saying. You're
Sorry,
saying that
opponents,
the
can you let me
status-
finish,
Okay,
please?
Sure.
Yeah. CJS, we tell you we're trying them as these criminals, right? We're not saying we torture and prosecute them in the first place. So we need these people to determine whether they are guilty. And for the juries, they're well represented. So racial minorities are also going to be in the jury. So it doesn't
Sorry,
happen
do you have
of
any
abuse for
evidence of the racial
minorities, right?
makeups of the jury? Because we can tell you that most of the jury are made up of the racial
Even if there is
majorities instead
one
of
racial minority in every jury, that already solves the issue because
Do you
they
have
all
any
have to
evidence?
convict
Sorry,
him.
do you have any evidence to show that? You can't just simply
Even
make
okay,
things
you
up.
have to provide an example of they're all white in every single example, right?
We're not saying they're all white in every single example. We're saying that they're
And we
mostly
spent
made
like
up
2
racial
minutes
majority.
or like 2 minutes and
Because
30 seconds. Can I have a question?
You were not answering
have
my
a question?
directly. Sure.
Can I have a question? Yeah. So you talked about vigilantism, right? So how does JJS prevent this issue?
We're saying that your assumption about vigilantism is based on the assumption that these people are not satisfied with the punishment. However, we have
I'm
already
saying the
told you that
society is not actually satisfied.
Yeah, the
right? I'm
society
not
is not
talking about the
satisfied.
victims.
However, what we are talking about is that 2 to 1 of these victims are already satisfied with the
Right, not the victims,
and they want
society.
their rehabilitation. Why would the society take revenge? Because they have not been harmed in any way, so there's no point for them to take revenge.
All right, now summary speech.
I'd like to check one card. 81% of the abuse rate.
Sorry, opponents, can I check a card before you proceed?
Yeah, sure.
The 88% corrupted jury.
And we also want to check the 81% abuse.
Yeah.
Okay, one by one, please. Please send in your card first. Thanks.
Can we also have the card? Thank you.
We send it to you like the card. So can you please send in the link
Okay,
citation and the
thanks.
card also. Thanks.
We're sending it.
Okay, just
Thanks,
clarify that.
thanks.
Anyone needs
And we would like to have 30 seconds for time. Thank you.
So I'm ready. So on summary. I'm gonna start right now if no one's not ready. To do our off-time roadmap, first I'll go through some definition clarification, then we're gonna go through the evidence checking clarification, then going through two clash. The first clash about moral and second clash about practical benefits. If no one's not ready, my time gonna starting right now. First, the framework. We are actually conscious of when basically protecting both the victim and the juveniles. Move on. The criminal justice system is only taking away the part of criminal rights from a period of time. It doesn't mean that we just take away all of our rights forever. We still have to offer them basic rights such as right to defend for themselves and right to receive a proper treatment in the jail. Let's move on to the property crime definition. According to the Oxford Dictionary, which the property crime can be classified according to whether they involve violence, fraud, steal, destruction, or any other thing. So the violent property crime is also counted as a property crime. Also have the evidence showing that 90% of this crime are actually violent crime. So our evidence definitely stand on the status quo. Let's move on to the evidence checking. First, they talk about vigilantism. There's no data in the website, but however, the evidence is not specified to the juvenile system. Second, the 70% return to the detention center, which is not specified to the juvenile system, which is also not topical. So their offense rate decrease is not topical. Third, they talk about 81% abuse rate in our set, but however, the next paragraph actually directly talk about how this 81% is already being solved under status quo in today's debate. So basically, all of our three evidence about general, including both the con and pro set, or the problem is already being solved. So drop all of our impact from your ballot. Move on to the clash. Clash one moral. We'll talk about mental maturity. We'll talk about children can be too emotional. So if they commit the crime again, it's not their fault. It has nothing to do with the community. We're seeking the difference between 12 years old children fighting with each other and 20 years old adult fighting with each other. Because it's 12 years old children, they really cannot control themselves. So basically, they're fighting with each other, basically causing mental immaturity. So that's exactly why we're seeking the difference. Move on to the abuse. They talk about how they're gonna separate juvenile and criminal, which is useless. We'll tell you if they want to separate them, why don't we just keep the two systems separately? And we talk about adult jail violates juvenile basic human right at every single aspect. We provide you two examples. First, we'll talk about physical abuse. There's 50% more likely to be attacked with a weapon. And we talk about sexual abuse, with 80% suppress gender non-conforming behavior while dating due to fears of sexual harassment and assault. These two single impact all of their impacts. Move on to the bias. They say how jury can work, but however, we're already showing the evidence that basically 99% of the jury are actually white people and causing 88% discrimination, since the problem actually happened on both sides. However, their side with more severe problem should be put on the first place. They say how their side can have a more fair judgment, fair punishment, but however, we're saying that they're the one that basically locking the juvenile up. The judge, simple logic, they're the one basically locking them up. Two problems. First, we tell discrimination, black people getting more severe punishment while only white people get fair judgment. Second, we tell their punishment is actually more lenient. We tell the juvenile offender transferred to the adult criminal justice system have been actually released on probation early so that many can end up just serving shortened sentence, which only counts for which the basically severe punishment, successful rate on their side basically only counts for 30% cases. Let's move on to the clash 2 practical. Talk about vigilantism. We tell first 90% of vigilantism is not specified to our side, but so basically this problem happened on both sides of the world. Talk about recidivism rate. We tell that basically our side with the 70%, their side with the 70% recidivism rate should be solved on the first place. However, our side with 1% increase in education and can just reduce 30%, be more effective. For all of reasons, boss strongly urge for combat it. Thank you.
Can we check the card saying that 99% of the jury is white?
Sure.
Card, please. Thanks.
There are several examples in the website talking about all white juries, so you can just check it for yourself.
Okay. Then, if that's the case, Then my time for summary starts now. Starting with the main clash in this debate, which is practical benefits such as reducing crime, we thought that this should be the most important clash evaluated in today's round because we thought that when people does not recidivize, that prevents family from being hurt. But we're talking about vague human rights that does not do any practical benefits. So judge, vote definitely vote for our side because simply they do nothing, right? The only suggested solution there is education, rehabilitation, and restorative justice. We thought that before even talking about whether their solution is good or bad, we thought that throughout the whole debate until summary speech, they never offered a single piece of evidence that says in the JJS there is actually education, there's actually rehabilitation. They also dropped a very important piece of evidence as that Fagan 2010 explains juvenile correctional facility is designed mainly to control its residents and restrict their personal freedom, which is that whatever developmental importance these forms of self-expression and self-determination may have for adolescent, it is sacrificed to the primary goals of security, control, discipline, and punishment. In other words, we're the side that's actually offering rehabilitation, as my partner explained in Rebuttal Speech, which is the Austin James card. Austin James tells us that in the adult prison, we're offering rehabilitation, we're offering them education and mental care so that they can be revitalized but from the harm of abusiveness, but also most important of all, we separate them so that they will not be harmed by victimization. We tell that at the end of the day, we're the side that's protecting the juvenile's right, even if you go with a framework about all humans' rights. While their side, they only punishes, but not enough that that can prevent vigilantism from happening. So at the end of the day, our side, which is deterrence plus rehabilitation, for deterrence, it reduces recidivism by 75% and prevents crime on a scale of 16% to 68%. Even if you judge you by their evidence, still we outweigh, especially consider that their evidence is not violent crime, but just crime in general. And second, about the jury point, after we checked their evidence never talked about 99%, and their 88%, it is saying that 88% of the victims are black. That just explains why we need a jury. In our opponent's world, our opponent says that because like there are many victims that are black, then just go for it, then just support racism. That is what our opponent is saying. Our opponent is saying that, okay, having a white judge is better than having a jury with some black people in them. That our opponent just simply supporting racism, or we're trying to establish a fair court. Even if you buy the 99% or all white 99% jury evidence, we still tell you that 1% of black is better than 0%, which is the judge, right? At the end of the day, we're the side that actually stops racism from happening in the court and being fair. But most important of all, talking about human rights, we simply tell you the fact that we're the side that actually respects human rights. Our opponents, we have explained that if they're incarcerated or if they commit a crime, they cannot be treated as a normal person. Neither side can respect full total human rights. But then if we have to weigh which sides disrespect more human rights, it is definitely them. As Austin James, which is, as I previously said, we have offering them mental care, we separate them and protects them. We're the side that cares them and make them into a better person. However, in their side, they only restrict their personal freedom. They don't even give them any form of privacy. We tell that is really bad. Privacy will probably be considered as one of the most basic human rights. If our opponents in the juvenile justice system doesn't even give them privacy, they don't get them, like, they don't even let them, like, they don't even let them communicate with their family and parents, they're definitely restricting human rights while we're protecting them. Thus, we're proud to stand on the affirmation.
Are you guys ready for the cross?
Yeah, sure.
You can have the first question.
Thank you. So the first question we're gonna ask right now. So in your summary, talk about how actually in our side we don't really let them communicate with their family. Can you give me a specific example showing this is actually true?
Okay, we tell that like evidence you drop for the entire debate, which is mentioned in our constructive. Fagan 2010 explains juvenile correctional facility is designed to mainly control its residents and restrict their personal freedom. Movement and association are extensively regulated.
Can you just not read the card and just give us the logical explanation, please?
Okay, so it's like this. We tell that although our opponents say they have rehabilitation, right, that's just in an ideal utopia world. But if we look into reality, probably because of government corruption, probably because that simply we have to control them or else they're too dangerous,
But
the
is it
juvenile
all
justice
you're
system
asking me
probably
to-
offers some sort of rehabilitation.
That is
but
only
this
an
rehabilitation
assumption,
is
and also
useless.
we're
It's
telling
being
that
covered by
88%.
punishment.
Okay,
The reason
so
why we dropped this
look,
card is basically
Look,
our
our side only wants to say several things about the JJS,
Can you
right?
just,
One
let
of
us
which
finish,
is when
please?
you talk about the Fagan 2010,
you asked
they're
us-
trying to
you-
actually
Can you just
they're trying to
finish?
have retribution, right?
Sorry.
But that's not working. We tell
Sorry.
you there's only a half of the punishments
Sorry.
in the JJS compared to CJS. Sorry, you asked me a question, I'm going to answer it. Let's move on to the next question, right?
Can we just finish?
Yeah, basically what you're saying that when
can-
we drop this evidence is basically saying that your evidence is basically an assumption. You don't have any data. You don't have any real.
Why is it an
examples.
assumption?
Yeah, like we gave you a substantial card, right? Well, your side is actually making assumptions.
And you
Your
don't have
side
any
is
logical
living in a
explanations of
utopian world.
how our side limit their freedom.
Hey,
However, on
look,
your
that
side, you're just
refusing to buy
simply
it, that we
locking
don't
these
have it,
people up.
right?
Can
Sorry.
you just let us finish
warranted
and
our
stop
evidence about
interrupting?
Sorry, we're not saying we're locking these people up. We're saying
Can
the
we just
main
finish?
purpose of JJS
Can we
in the
just finish?
status quo has sorry, can you let me finish? I have never had a chance to answer your question,
I'm
right?
sorry, you
In
just
the
spent
status
like
quo,
30
JJ
seconds
has
talking
turned
about.
into a place of retribution,
you
yet
asked-
it's not effective as well.
Yeah.
Right?
So look, Judge, the case is like here. We really want to take this out in Grand Crossfire. Let's just like clear things out. We tell that we gave you this fake in 2010 card, seeing that how juvenile justice system offers no rehabilitation and restrict their personal rights. However, our opponent asked us for a logical explanation. We explained it. JJS probably wants retribution, but doesn't do it correctly.
Sorry, you're misunderstanding my question. My question's actually
All right,
really
sorry,
simple
we
and
spent a
really
minute on this.
simple.
Let's
2 minutes.
2 minutes on this. Let's move on, right?
You guys are not
Alright.
answering our question and spent a minute on this,
Sorry,
and you're
let's
not
move
even
on, let's
letting
move
us.
on, let's
Not
move
even
on.
letting us.
Answer
Can
your
we
question
just
multiple
finish this question because
Director
you have not
and
cleared
you're
anything up.
abusing the
Okay.
crossfire. Can you not abuse the crossfire time? It's a two-way conversation.
Opponents, can we agree that we're trying these people in CJS, not just prosecuting them? This is the topic resolution, right? Trying them in CJS.
So what we're saying is that in the CJS, these people are abused. So we're saying that in
Okay,
the
Can
CJS,
we agree
they will
we're
be
trying
abused
them
and their
in the
rights will be taken
CJS,
away.
not sending them to the prison? It's a yes or no question.
No, that what we're saying, as you mentioned yourself, you think the CJS has
So is
more
the topic
severe
asking
punishment,
about
and we're
whether we should prosecute
Sorry-
them or whether we should try them
sorry,
as adults?
you guys just
Topic
keep
asks us
interrupting
whether we
us
should
during the
try them.
crossfire,
The
and we
topic doesn't
can't
ask
even
us
say
should we
anything.
torture them or not. The
That's
topic
not
asks
what
us,
we're
like, should we
saying.
try them as adults?
Yeah,
Right?
you're not
Right.
even letting us make any clarifications, and I will make clarifications.
Okay,
about
that's time.
Yeah. So I would like to take all my remaining prep. Thank you. Okay, has anyone not already? So my final focus will start. Now, let's stress about the framework again. The criminal justice system should preserve everyone's right, including those of the criminals, because otherwise we would just torture and kill all these criminals according to our opponent's logic. As they mentioned that these juveniles do not deserve rights, which is a logic fallacy and simply doesn't make sense. Our opponents are talking about how morality is not important, and the next second they just stress about us limiting the juveniles' rights. We do not see what ground they're taking here. However, we're telling that we definitely win on the moral side, as our opponents are the side that are limiting the rights of the juveniles in the adult prison. So they're locking these juveniles up in an abusive environment. As they have admitted themselves, they're trying to punish these juveniles more severely. However, firstly, we're telling that there's physical abuse. Second is sexual abuse. And lastly is racism in the adult prison. However, our opponents have not provided us with any counter evidence in our side showing that these problems do exist on our side. So we believe it would definitely be more beneficial if we just let them remain in the juvenile system that are designed for the juveniles and can give them just treatment instead of putting them into the adult system that would just simply abuse their rights and take away their rights to defend for themselves and take away their rights to receive appropriate punishment in the adult prison. And we are telling that our opponents keep talking about how they will have practical benefits. However, our opponents have never provided us with any evidence that shows these people are even receiving the punishment, which is a prerequisite of all of their impacts. As they don't have this piece of evidence, all of our opponents' impacts should collapse. And we're telling that on our side, we are actually solving this problem, as with every 1% increase in education, 3,590 of these crimes have been reduced, which is 30% more than our opponent's side. So the only thing they talk about is the deterrent effect, which they do not have any evidence for, which they cannot provide any evidence for that these people are even receiving the punishment. So all of the impacts on our opponent's side collapse, and they are just simply abusing the rights of these juveniles by not providing them with the appropriate services that they should have in the prisons, and saying that the rights of these juveniles are not important and they do not deserve rights. So for all these reasons, we should win both morally and practically. For that, we lower recidivism rate and we respect the rights of everyone. Thank you.
All right, is everybody ready? And if so, I'll begin my speech. Cool. So my time starts now. 3 things, Judge, you evaluate. First, Fagan 2010 card already proves JJS as ineffective in every case. They do not provide rehabilitation, and their recidivism and their retribution is actually worse than the CJS as well. What we are trying them as CJS, which is the topic resolution, purpose is trying to let them actually have what accommodates to them the best, right? If you have a mental illness, then you should go to a rehab center, or if you take drugs, you should go to a rehab center. If you killed somebody, you should go to retribution, which is prison. So we're not saying we should prosecute them. We are saying we should find the best fit for them, right? Therefore, we win even if you buy all of their evaluation and hours as well. Now let's take a look at the first thing they talk about. Hansen 14 card already proves 2 things, right? First, deterrence works. Second, and these teenagers can actually evaluate. Our card speaks like this: 13 to 68% of violent crime is reduced for juveniles when severe laws are introduced. This means that they can evaluate, and deterrence is actually working better than our opponent's side. Second thing they talk about is the bias and the minorities being abused. However, juries are a well-rounded group in general. We protect the innocent people who didn't actually commit the crime. If they are tried and found out to be innocent, that is our side's benefit, right? They're still tried in the CJS, but they can be found out to be innocent. Last, vigilante justice is derived from the fear and anger and lack of punishment, right? JJS only has a half of the punitiveness of CJS, which is why even if you kill somebody, you only get like a 3 or 4 year sentence. And these people, out of fear and anger, they're going to punish them and prosecute them. And it's worse than the public, and it's worse than the government and the public, because they know no boundaries. They're going to kill them and they're going to torture them. And on abuse, we tell you we already solve it in the CGS according to Austin 2000 by isolating them, right? The reason we separate them is for safety and justice. On our side, the utilitarian benefits is reducing 74.5 according to Redding and Fuller. We already tell you this benefit even in an unfair comparison of static criminal and violent criminals. So no matter which one you buy, you're voting for the pro.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, speakers, let's wait. Judges will decide and then announce the results.
Can all the judges please vote on the media program, please? The judges all put in their their decisions in the mini program.
I've already done that. I don't really know. Is there still
I did-
some error with that?
It's still saying refreshing, so I don't know the
Yeah.
results.
Should we just send this to the host of the, or just
Yeah,
to the
sure.
head? Okay.
Just send it to the host. Okay, I got all your rules and here's the result. Here's the result. 3 votes for the pro team and 2 votes for counting. Alright, so congratulations to the pro team, you have won this debate. I'm gonna go ahead and give some brief feedbacks because I'm in a little bit of a rush. So I hope that's okay with everybody else. So I voted for the pro team personally because I feel like to be honest, I don't think the 3 crossfires in this debate created enough clash points or voting issues for me to make my decision. So my decision was largely based on whichever side offered me a better world in which majority of the society was taken into consideration, since I believe that was both sides' framework. So upon reviewing my notes from the constructive speeches, I do feel like the pro team did a better job at that, since they consider not only the juvenile offenders themselves, they also consider the victims, and they also pointed out why the juvenile justice system in itself was flawed, but I don't think the con team was able to come up with a good enough response for that. And another thing with this debate, my biggest issue is the way you guys presented the crossfires. I do think majority of the time in crossfires were wasted on petty arguments about like, okay, you're not letting me finish, I need to finish, stuff like that. I don't think that was necessary. When it comes to stuff like that, I personally would just move on to the next question, especially I think during the second crossfire and the grand crossfire, one of you guys were like, okay, we've spent enough time talking about this one issue, I want to address other stuff. But I think you just stopped there and you didn't throw out that question. I feel like if you did throw out that question, you would have shifted the focus of the grand crossfires. And personally speaking, I do feel like the con side was a little bit unnecessarily aggressive during the crossfires, especially with, I think, the second crossfire. Like, you were asking questions, but you were not letting your opponents address their answers enough. They answered halfway through it. Maybe you feel like, okay, they've said enough. I think I understood the point, but the judges were not. At least I personally did not understand what they were trying to express with their answers. So I do feel like in the future, that's something you should be thinking about. Another thing is that with crossfires, you really don't want to come up as overly aggressive, because a lot of the times that could be a big turnoff for the judges. It makes everything harder for them. And I just think in the future, you can try to be a little more civil with crossfires and stuff like that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you both are the best teams of these tournaments. That's why you are in final. So without winning or not winning, you both are good. So I congratulate to both of you. But I think this time the information of pro side was more attractive for me. That's why I voted for the pro side, because their information was providing me a permanent and reliable solution to eliminate the crimes. That's why I vote for pro side. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Best of luck for next time. Thank you.
Yeah, I personally also voted for the pro team. I think overall you guys did a better job in defending your own arguments, and I really liked the rebuttal and how you guys presented a summary. So I basically ended up voting on your vigilantism argument. I like the ways how you guys construct that argument on like societal vigilantism, but not a victim committing to vigilante. And that's a little tricky to the concept because they failed to respond to that. And also on the clash of whether CGS or GGS does harm to the juveniles, I think pro convinced me more that the criminal justice system is slightly more effective in that it separates children and adults and offers rehab. And then pro did present me with very clear evidence impact showing the percent of recidivism reduced. And overall, I think Han did a very good job, fairly. You guys could have made better responses to their vigilantism argument. And also, I feel like some of the claims you made should have more evidence to back you up. Yeah, so congratulations again to the pro. Very good job.
Okay, personally, I voted for the team because I think they did a good job in all of the competition. Actually, I voted for Con because they counted all of the main points of their arguments and the opponents in the rebuttal speech, and their summary and final focus was really convincing to me. That's why I voted for the Con team. But it's a competition, so I will say best of luck for all of the next competitions. Thank you.
Well, my decision goes to the con side as I thought that was a close debate, and the framework I took the con side, so everyone's right, and I give my decision basically based on these clashes, psychological maturity, and jury fairness, abuse, and the impact weighting. Still, I gotta say that sometimes I feel like both sides were just arguing parallelly, and the caches weren't fully reasoned, so that you guys might next time perform better in especially the crossfire part, as some of the judges have mentioned before, that could be more civilized. And then like the first one about the maturity, I gave it to pro as to prove that the age could not be the only standard, but more a test could have been taken, and this is really nice soundsy on this problem. And then for the jury, I give this to con side as they showed persuasive evidence on this. And also, abuse issue is won by con as they turn the remember that was the 81% evidence, and the pro didn't really offer the solid solvency on this. And impact winning on the for the con side in education income and in education input and output is very crucial and also impressive. I guess that's all for today, and thank you for your good performance, and wish you guys good luck in the future tournament. Yeah.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, opponents. Good round. Bye.
Have a nice day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening.